So my talk here, Patient Design Can Change the World. What I want to do is
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Especially when you face away from this direction, I can hear you.
I'll speak a little bit louder. Sorry about
That's
that.
better.
Okay, so my talk, Patient Design Can Change the World. What I'm aiming to tailor this talk to is for patients and caregivers who might have brilliant ideas that could lead to products that can really change the game for people living with tube feeding TPN. And also for industry, because I really do believe that industry can play a huge part in making changes for us, but to do that, you get a lot better results when you include people who actually live with what you're looking for. So my conflicts of interest, obviously I do work for Lean. My product does pay me, but I'm not trying to, I'm going to tell you the story of how I developed my product, but I'm not trying to sell you anything. So before I can really get into how this all came to be, I want to tell you a little bit about the product I developed myself. It's called Stoma Ease. It's a powder that absorbs the leakage around the feeding tube site. And this came from my lived experience with the feeding tube. So as I go through how somebody could bring a product to the market, and I'm going to go from the concept of the design all the way through getting it out there. And so before we really delve into that, how I became a feeding tube consumer. So my primary diagnosis is juvenile onset Parkinson's disease. I had deep brain stimulation surgery for that 10 years ago. There's a picture of me back in 2009 when I was 14. So my diagnosis took me 4 long years. And then in my early 20s, I developed secondary gastroparesis and chronic intestinal pseudoobstruction, which led to me being tube fed and then being on TPN for most of my 20s. So my diagnosis and treatment is pretty inextricably linked to how I became a scientist. It is all very connected there. As I was going through high school and college, I found my interest in chemistry along with trying to figure out my diagnosis. And I really do believe that living with a rare disease that you have to constantly find solutions for really does make you pretty brilliant, because we're always innovating, trying to figure out the solutions for our own selves, and that does directly translate to industry. So my education, I went to the University of Redlands, and I graduated in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in science and chemistry. And I had always intended on pursuing graduate work, but my health kind of never played along. So I actually started TPN a month after I graduated from university. And so I kind of stumbled into an accidental career. I spent my 20s working with a lot of other patient scientists and doing a lot of health advocacy, and that kind of brought me into this world. So during in 2020, the pandemic began, and as a high-risk individual, I went home. I had to kind of be a shut-in there, and I started to fixate on a problem that I wanted to solve. I thought that if I could just take one problem and fix it, it would kind of be some sort of taking your power back there in a world that felt very overwhelming and like you didn't have a lot of choices. And so I decided to address the chemical burn that I had in my body. So I had gotten my J-tube revision done in 2016, and since then I had a very bad burn around the tube site. And so I thought, okay, I wanted to fix it. So I tried all the products on the market, and nothing really worked. The products designed for ostomy bags are designed to press, so the bags go on top of them, and that doesn't work for feeding tubes very well. So I spent about 6 months delving really hardcore into the science and solved the problem for myself. So this slide, don't worry too much about reading. I'm going to go through each piece individually. I've kind of mapped out the road that I took and the individual pieces that the individual sort of steps that I went through from starting with an idea to actually bringing a product to the medical market. So first, you have to have a problem, right? You can't make something without a problem to solve. So with my chemical burn, I had been to wound care clinics, I tried all the stuff, and nothing really worked. This is not my pictures, because I didn't think to take as many pictures back then, but it was pretty similar, a little bit worse than this. This is somebody's before pictures who had used our product. So as you can see, it's quite irritated and painful. Living with that was not fun. So in order for the medical industry to solve a problem, they have to know first that the problem exists. So when you go to your doctors and your clinics, they might see problems, but that doesn't always get translated immediately into the literature. The medical industry doesn't necessarily know that some of the problems that patients see every day and that are very common within patient forums exist. This graphic was made by a friend of mine, another advocate with juvenile onset Parkinson's disease. That red dot there is demonstrating the 2 hours that she spends, or the 1 hour rather, 2 half-hour appointments that she spends in her neurologist's office every year. And all of the other dots are all of the other hours of the year that she spends living in her own body. So what you see in a clinic is such a tiny proportion of what the lived experience is. And then you as a patient have to translate that experience to your doctor. And there are so many different concerns that the vast majority of what you're dealing with might be completely unknown. So for industry, if you don't hire patients, you're missing all of these hours of experience that somebody lives in their own body and thousands of problems that you might not even know exist. So once you have a problem, you do need the technical experience to create the solution. I want to give this disclaimer because I had the background in chemistry to do this, but you don't need to be a chemist to bring forward the solution. Not all of the solutions are purely science-based. I think a really good example of it is this company that I've seen develop in the past year or so. They're called Youth Crews. They're a diaper company that makes diapers for children who are between baby sizes and adult sizes. And this came from a father whose daughter had a medical emergency and was in the hospital and was using the diapers there, and they put adult ones on her and she was about 9 years old. The baby ones were too small, but the adult ones were huge, and that was causing all kinds of issues. And he realized that there were a bunch of other patients who, had that issue, and whose parents were trying to make wrong sizes work. So he started a company to fill in that gap. Like I said, not all problems need a scientist. Some problems just need somebody with the passion and with the experience and the motivation to do it. So if you want to make something that involves science and you don't have that experience, you can find a partner as well to work with it. That's the other thing I want to also sort of caveat is that you can create a scientific solution without being a scientist yourself, because if industry partners with patients, they can pair people up to do some testing and do some lived experience, give that feedback. So once you have this idea, you need to identify what aspects of that problem you need to solve. And this really is where the lived experience is truly vital. Thinking critically about how something could remedy a solution and also how it would fit into the patient's life. I think that's the other thing that industry is really missing, is that they might think, oh, this solution will work for this problem, but they might not realize that their idea for the solution isn't practical for how a patient lives. It might take up too much time or be an undue burden to the life of the patient who's just trying to go about their everyday life without having all of these additional problems from their treatments. So when I was creating StomaEase, after having tried a bunch of different solutions for chemical burns, I had to identify my design goals. And what my 2 design goals were from trying other products is that I wanted the leakage to be pulled away from my skin, and I wanted it to gel together without sticking to my skin for easy removal. So when I was designing it and going through the chemistry, I was looking for ingredients and processes to make those design goals possible. And once I had this is where the real work begins, right? This is where you dive into trying out different things. You put all your research into, just kind of taking that leap and trying out, creating a product, seeing how it works, making revisions. And that's when you're left with a prototype. So this is kind of the first phase of it. And honestly, this is probably the easy part. For me, this is the part that very much came naturally. I created this product, and then I realized that there were a bunch of other people, thousands of other people who were living with the same problem that I was, and I had a solution, and I thought, okay, well, now what, right? Now do I want to just keep this for myself, or do I want to get into the next, get it to the market for other people to use as well? So once I had this product, then the next step obviously here is testing your product. Obviously your solution has to work. And so, you know, this also very much depends on what kind of product it is, right? Whether it's like legally and ethically safe to test it on yourself and, you know, others. I always say with informed consent always, if you're going to let other people use something you made, you need to tell them what's in it, and you need to, you know, make sure that it's not something that you're doing recklessly there. And so this is where my business partner, my dad, came in. He had seen this work for me, and I was telling him about, like, you know, I've developed this product and it's really worked for me, and he was like, oh, hey, you know, you really do need to get it out there. And so he had business experience, and I am just the chemist. I don't really know anything about business. And so he had been on this whole medical journey with me to begin with, so it kind of became a really good partnership and helped me sort of navigate those next steps. Now, like I said, this is really the hard part, identifying this path forward. This is where we definitely made a lot of mistakes, and you know, we were doing a lot of research trying to figure out how exactly you can get something to the market, and this is when we realized that we really needed to make a partner in the industry. At this point, if you haven't connected with industry, it's time to do so, because there are people who have that experience, and this is not a two-person job for sure. This is you know, a bigger thing. You need distribution, you've got manufacturing, all those things that we as two individuals didn't have. So this is where we needed to find that next step, and we contacted the Oley Foundation, and we went to the Oley 2023 conference, and that is where we were able to find a company to partner with us. And so, yeah, finding the team and funding, of course, you know, it's definitely not easy, and this is why I really want companies to hear this and to see that they should make it easier for patients to take that step forward. But it is hard. I'm not gonna, you know, pretend it wasn't hard, but we were lucky to find a small company that really had the passion to help patients and want to create innovative solutions to help patients live their everyday lives more comfortably. And I think that a lot of the companies do want to do that. So, you know, I hope that companies see this and hire more patients. So we met our dream team in Oley 2023. After struggling to find a company, we met quite a few different companies. We met Martin and Maureen, who run the and they had a sign on their booth saying that they were looking for patients with ideas. And so, you know, I was like, well, actually, I already have this and a patent pending product here that I had already created and tested. And so we were lucky to have found the right partners in that. And from our initial partnership, we actually were able to design the second product together. And I really do think that this is a great story of blending medical innovation and expertise and patient lived experience. So I started with the powder, and I was using that underneath gauze and duty pads. But we had come up with the idea, Martin combining his experiences as a medical engineer and you know, my being able to explain what works and what doesn't, and we were able to make a companion product to our powder. It's a disc that goes on top of that goes underneath the tube and on top of the powder and holds it in place, and then is washable and reusable. So we were able to take how I lived with the tube and with the powder and how it worked and fit into my life, and with that lived experience, combining it with some smart engineering, and that would not have happened without really truly collaboration. And so in Aspen 2024, we launched Stomies together, and then last Oley was kind of our first big, we had only had it on the market there for about a month, and so it was kind of our first big showing, and so it was a really wonderful experience there. So that was my road to market here, working together to get it done the right way. I've seen products having kind of been put out there without a lot of care for, one, making sure that everything is good manufacturing processes, and without sort of going through the process. And it's really worth doing right, Because ultimately, when you make something for people who are living with any kind of disability, you're taking their life and their comfort in your own hands. And so it's really important to do it properly and to do it with passion. And so this first year now of being on the market has been all about getting feedback and about putting it out there for people to use, and hearing their experiences and see if there's anything we could improve, and introducing people to our products. You know, growth can be slow, but it happens, and it's just really important to do things the right way, and there really is no better feeling than watching your products help people. So, some final thoughts before questions. Use NDAs. You want to protect yourself and your ideas, because your lived experience is not just valuable, it is valuable, that's the thing, it is truly valuable. You don't want, there are bad eggs out there, and you don't want your experience to just be taken and used without getting proper compensation. The patient experience is one of probably the most undervalued aspects in healthcare that really does need to be valued and paid for. That's the other thing. Companies should not be using patients' lived experiences and their input without compensation, because they're looking to make millions of dollars off of our experience and off of our lives. So ultimately, they should be compensated properly. Somebody not wanting to sign an NDA is truly a red flag, because it protects both you and them. And once again, you don't have to be a chemist to make a product. Ultimately, we have so much collective shared experience between us, and so many solutions that are potentially there. And I really do want patients to bring more to the market, because I think that it will improve everybody's lives. So, that's how I did it, and I know that there are so many patients like me who can do it, and I hope that this presentation kind of showed you that it is possible, and I look forward to seeing what other people do in the patient community. Thank you. Yeah.
How have you found the most success in getting feedback? Like, I'm here as an exhibitor, and something we're trying to do is get more feedback with our products from our patients. And it's really hard. Like, as someone who's healthy, I try to be as empathetic as possible.
Yeah.
But that feedback is so valuable. But so many of our patients who are using our products are so often in and out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And so, have you found like the most success through like social media or focus groups? Like, where do you go?
Yeah, that's definitely social media. Probably it is. That is honestly one of the hardest parts for sure. Like you said, because patients are sick and have crazy lives and are doing everything. That is. I think just kind of some gentle prodding is all we really have. Also, I think addressing certain healthcare providers as well is one of the more important things, because they get to hear from their patients how things are working. That's probably about all I have for that. That is definitely one of the things that we've found hardest, and that is probably what makes things, I think, slower to uptake, is because you're dealing with a group that has a lot going on. Yeah.
You're considering a medical device.
Yes, it is a medical device. That is one of the big issues that we had to face when bringing it to market. It counts as a class 3
Class 1.
10K exam, or no, class 1, sorry, class 1 is the lowest. Class 3 is the highest. Yeah, other way around. So class 1, 510K exempt product. So for medical devices, class 1 is the lowest, so it's like something that goes topically, is not inside of your body. Something like a gastric stimulator is like a class 3, where it's like the highest level of FDA clearance, where you have to do extensive clinical trials. So identifying, kind of what classification, and also FDA guidelines. That's something we were very mindful of. Like I said, because it's being put on someone's body, you have to, you want to do it right and work with those guidelines. But that can be really hard. I think that's where industry is like the biggest partner in that, because they've done it before. Yeah.
How did you cope with needing funding, and like where did you get that from?
Yeah, that was definitely the hardest part. So that really came when we met our industry partners. They took care of like the manufacturing part. Initially it wasn't super expensive, because I was just buying ingredients for like a low thing, so that was on me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is definitely like the hardest part, is trying to secure funding. So basically, like when you start to need, I think that the when you need partners in it is when you need money, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
If you were gonna give one tip that someone wanted to create a product or something like this, what would be that one tip to get them going off of their own phone?
I would definitely say take the time to take stock of not just your own experiences, but like within your patient community. And also spend a good chunk of time looking at what exists out there and identify those pieces of like what doesn't work about it. Because I think that what doesn't work is almost more important than what does, for me at least, definitely. Yeah.
That was a great talk.
Thank you.
Are you going to aim for insurance coverage?
That is a big, so this first year has very much been getting it to direct to consumer. Right now we're working on getting into hospitals and distribution, and then after that comes insurance coverage. It is very difficult to get insurance coverage. Yes.
I work outpatient, I'm a dietitian, and this is a huge problem.
Yeah.
So can people just buy direct right now?
Yes, yeah, so right now it's, we first started selling on Etsy, but first of all, that was like this. It's now on Amazon and eBay, and so direct from company to consumers is generally how these things start, which is honestly unfair to patients because it, like, ultimately I wish that like they didn't have to buy it, right? Because their comfort should come from healthcare, but sadly, realistically, that's not how it goes.
This is true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it patented?
So right now, we've had it since the past 2 years. It's patent pending at the moment. It's on somebody's desk in the US Patent Office. So it will be.
Is the product such that it's not, it wouldn't be easy for somebody to duplicate it just by changing one little thing and?
That's the point of a
Yeah,
patent.
that is one of the big issues with all this, you know, because it is pending, we do have some protections even with pending to go after if somebody does that. But that is like kind of one of the risks you take in launching something, sadly. I wish there were better answers for that, but yeah.
Have you thought about broadening its application
Yes.
into other areas? Is
Definitely.
that like part of the patent?
Yeah, so the patent kind of covers, there's certain claims on it, but the patent is mostly just the processes of making things. The patent in no way stops you from, say, applying it to something like wound care.
Right.
Or like certain catheters, or like you can expand beyond your initial market, and so we have had some people use it. Some of the most interesting thing someone used it for was for hidradenitis. They had a lot of like sort of leaking infection areas that had like they used to stop some of the leakage. So yeah, there's definitely like you can definitely expand. I think that almost all of our solutions in healthcare, I've seen patients repurpose a lot of things, like using a catheter bag for a drainage bag. You know, ultimately within healthcare, yeah, definitely you can expand past what you originally intended something for. Anyone else? All right. Thank you guys.